It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Your Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome and thank you for joining the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am one of your hosts, Chris Micieli from Locked On Avalanche, and with me every Thursday, Adam Denker from Locked On Lightning. Adam, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. As Lightning fans have already heard me document the last couple of days or so, the massive amounts of disrespect that's been going on towards the reigning Stanley Cup champions. But other than that, been doing absolutely swell.
I was going to say, so you're not doing well.
Well, I am doing well, but we'll get into all of that. But I mean, right. I'm happy to talk about all the interesting things that have happened since we've last spoken. Obviously, we talked today about the big signings and trades.
Absolutely.
We'll be talking about winners and losers. So let's
where do we start? Jeez.
Yeah, why don't we start off with just our first impressions from this whole thing?
For me, it was, we had no idea how this was going to go down. This obviously was a free agency market and a free agency period that we've clearly never dealt with before. You know, the free agency started on a day when the league was supposed to start, and that just seemed odd in and of itself. And then, you know, was this going to be your typical July 1st where, you know, signings came fast and furious, and pretty early on you got the impression like, nope, that's not going to be the way that this goes. There were signings, you know, guys were being signed, but the big names were not coming off the board early. And then it kind of just made you think like, yeah, this is a different time for a lot of these teams. They're taking their time, and maybe the players are taking their time too, even to the point of like, you know, not everybody is signed, and that happens, but there's some players that have come out and said, I'm taking my time with this. So from that aspect, just the sheer signings, very slow moving on day one, which was a little bit of a surprise because we're not used to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I have to echo that as well. I mean, it was pretty much, considering I believe last season, this previous season, when we saw who was going to be eligible unrestricted free agents, I think there was a lot of excitement swirling around just for the anticipation of that. And it was overall a big letdown. Now, obviously, with the flat cap and everything, and I believe that's going to extend for the next 2 seasons, if I'm not wrong. So, yeah, I mean, this sets up potentially some other, you know, whether he decides to extend or not, Taylor Hall, we'll get into that. I mean, we both have interesting takes on that. But it was definitely, yeah, the flat cap, I think, just ruined everything for what could have been a good and exciting signing period. But it did, on the pro of all this, it did open up things for GMs to get very creative, most notably the creativeness of Joe Sakic out there in Colorado really impressed me. It was one of those things where every move that was popping on the board from Colorado, I was like, oh man. And then you saw, for example, we were talking before we were recording, and we'll get into that in just a little bit, with what the trade he made with Chicago was just pure genius. And yeah. I'm sure you're absolutely elated by how that deal went down. Well,
that deal, yeah, I mean, you can label it, I guess you can label it genius, but the deal he made with the Islanders to bring in Devin Taves for 2 future second round picks, knowing that the Islanders need to unload players, that was a man knowing what other teams are up against and taking advantage. That was a brilliant move.
Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed is that, and you kind of touched on it as well, is that teams weren't jumping the gun as quickly as you would have thought. And it seemed like part of that was because players were maybe unsure of where they were going. I mean, case in point, Taylor Hall and Alex Pietrangelo. I don't think we would have ever seen those two guys going to those two cities.
I mean, don't you feel like those were, for the most part, I think it's a consensus, those were the two biggest names on the market.
Oh, absolutely.
And I don't like either deal. I really
don't. Why don't we just go into it now? So big signings and trades. Taylor Hall, let's start it off. Obviously, probably the biggest name on the board going into this whole free agent, I guess you could call it a little bit of a fiasco, considering with everything that has not happened the way we wanted it to as hockey fans. I think we both think along the lines with this deal, it's clearly a money grab.
Huge.
I'm a big advocate for guys getting paid. Don't get me wrong. I believe these hockey players are the most underpaid professional athletes on the planet.
Right.
But having said that, it makes it that more important to let it be known, especially for a guy like Taylor Hall, who has jumped around quite a bit early on in his career. This is his fourth team.
Yeah.
And at some point you gotta put down roots, especially if you want to win. I mean, that was the one rumor that I'm sure you heard swirling around too, that he wanted to win. He wanted to go somewhere he wanted to win. And obviously a lot of people thought that Colorado was probably the top destination, considering they had some space to fit him in there in terms of cap space. I'm very curious as to how that would have worked out in terms of the lines, but 1 year, $8 million. Now it makes it even that harder if Buffalo still has plans to trade Jack Eichel. But I said to you through text a couple of days ago, I think that, if Buffalo could keep Taylor Hall around, and they build a little here and there, I see why not. This can't work in his advantage.
Right. I don't, if he signed like a 7-year deal or something like that with Buffalo, like, okay, like you're not going there to win this year, but over the course of 7 years, you would hope they can build around him, Eichel, what they got, and by the end of his contract, be a competitor. But to go that road, to say out loud, winning is important. Clearly, it is not. Clearly, it is. If you were signing a 1-year deal with Buffalo, I don't mean to anger any Buffalo fans right now, but you're not going to be, and he is not the answer to the problem in Buffalo. He'll help. I mean, I think Buffalo will be improved with him, but from what I understand, Avalanche, Joe Sakic tried to get him twice at the trade deadline last year and now. And he, from what I have read on, the Newswire in Avalanche world, we don't have a definite number, but people think it was in the $5 million, $6 million range for him. For I don't know the term, it might have been a 1 or 2 year deal, probably 1 year deal. Mm-hmm. And he flat out said no to that because he chased the money. And if you want to do that, and I put up a tweet about this, if you want to do that, just say you want to do that. Nobody will ever do that, but that's exactly what he did. He cut bait and run. And this was the first opportunity for him where he was in control. Everything else, he was being traded, and it was out of his control. Now he had control, and that's the decision he made.
And everything about Taylor Hall's game, if he could be successful, he needs a facilitator by him. Now, I don't know if that means Jack Eichel is going to take a back seat to him in this situation. Now, I don't expect Buffalo to make the playoffs. I do expect them to be a little bit better, improved. But now, given that we both agree on that, and we'll get it into Pietrangelo right after this very shortly, do you see him packing up and leaving at the end of the season if he's not well, obviously he can't be traded, I believe at this point. But do you believe that he's leaving at the end of the season, or do you think he says, you know what, I like the situation here, there is potential for us to win?
I guess anything's on the table with this guy. I don't know, because this is not like a show me contract. He's not like, there's always going to be a market for Taylor Hall. People are always going to want him and pay him top dollar. This is not a Tyson Barrie signing with Edmonton to prop up his stats and then next year sign with somebody that will overpay him because he played on a power play unit with Draisaitl and McDavid, and I fear and I feel sorry for the team that signs him next year with Tyson Barrie. But with Hall, like you said in the beginning, like the flat cap is here for a couple years. So he's going to be in the same exact situation he's in, that he was in before he signed with Buffalo next year, because what we got this year is going to be a carbon copy of what we get next year. Teams are not doling out these long contracts. You get some of them here and there, and maybe there will be a team that comes out and says, we'll offer you a 6-7 year deal. But I don't know. This was a head scratcher to me.
I just would have, if I was Taylor Hall, and if there was video that the Sabres, I actually tweeted it out, that when they were speaking to him on the phone and, they were pitching him and all that stuff, it still didn't look like he was sure that he wanted to go there.
No. Yeah.
If that's the case, if unless his agent just wasn't aware of what the cap situation was going on in the NHL, and I don't see a reason as to why you don't sign a 2-year deal, $16 million right there.
Yeah.
If you really want the money, but all right, we spent enough time on this ridiculous trade.
Before we get to Pietrangelo, let's get an ad in, and let's hear from rockauto.com. And chain stores have different price tiers for professional mechanics and do-it-yourselfers. rockauto.com prices are the same for everybody and are reliably low. rockauto.com always offers the lowest prices possible rather than changing prices based on what the market will bear, just like the airlines do. rockauto.com is for everybody and does not require a membership or an account login. rockauto.com is a family business serving auto part customers online for 20 years. Go to rockauto.com to shop for auto and body parts from hundreds of manufacturers. The rockauto.com catalog is unique and remarkably easy to navigate. Quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle and choose the brands, specifications, and prices you prefer. Best of all, the prices at rockauto.com are always reliably low, and the same for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Why spend up to twice as much for the same parts? Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck, and write Locked On in the section that asks, how did you hear about us? So they know that we sent you there. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. That is rockauto.com.
Alabama down a coach, Atlanta down big in the first inning. From our local experts to your ears, these are the biggest stories on the Locked On Podcast Network. Alabama Crimson Tide head coach Nick Saban has tested positive for the coronavirus. How will this affect their game plan against the number 3 ranked Georgia Bulldogs? You'll have to listen to Locked On Bama today for more on that. The Atlanta Falcons shut their facility down after a second positive coronavirus test, but their game against the Minnesota Vikings is on for now. Subscribe to Locked On NFL for the latest. And finally, the Atlanta Braves were down 11 runs to the LA Dodgers before you could blink in Game 3 of the NLCS. Listen to Locked On Dodgers today for a recap of an incredible first inning of offense. Local experts on the biggest stories. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. You were about to mention Alex Pietrangelo going to Vegas. When I said, I didn't like the deal, for him, it's great. He's making almost $9 million a year. Good for you. You cashed in. I think he was a little bit overvalued. He's a great player, but I think he hit the free agency market at the perfect time.
Oh,
people were going to overpay for him, and not overpay by a lot, but I think that's a lot of money to be dishing out to this guy. It is a awful deal for where Vegas stands right now. I feel like Vegas got kind of happy with the number one guy in the free agency market wants to come here, and let's get him at all costs so we can go to our social media accounts and tell everybody that we got him and not really look at the details of it all. Like, what are you doing, Vegas? But they got him, and now they're going to have to shed some cap and shed some players. And will it make them better in the long run is my question.
I don't think so. I think that Vegas in their first couple of years, they've been successful. I mean, they've been probably the most successful expansion team in the history of the NHL thus far, until possibly Seattle steals that title from them. But I think that they're building a dangerous precedent out there in the desert, and that's because and this all started from when they had these big contracts when they signed some of their long-term guys out there. And what you've been seeing every year is that you've been seeing guys getting shipped out to shed cap space, and then they just end up signing these big contracts. And one beat reporter, I believe it was on Sportsnet, compared to this rotation of players going in and out of Vegas as to how you would normally see out of a junior hockey team. Guys usually have lasted 2 years there.
Right.
Now, I honestly, as much as this is a great deal for Alex Pietrangelo, I mean, he's definitely capitalized on the defenseman friendly market, especially with goalies as well. I mean, I think this whole free agency market has been especially geared towards defensemen and goalies. I mean, look at the deal Torrey Krug got out there. And I think part of this decision for him to go out there was because of the way St. Louis handled the situation with him.
Right.
It seemed like once free agency officially started, there was news coming out that him and the Blues had no talks at all for him to renew a contract there, which is, he's your captain. I mean, that's not a good look.
I think they just expected him to come back.
Yeah, but you got to do something in that situation. But maybe they thought they were very confident in getting Torrey Krug, obviously, in which they did. But Alex Pietrangelo, great signing there for him. Not so much Vegas. I see him potentially. I think Vegas is going to regret this signing in about 2 years or even sooner. There's, like you said, they're still kind of trying to shed some cap space, and I think they're probably going to deal Fleury away at some point.
Right.
You can't be having that goalie tandem making that much money.
I mean, look at what Washington did, bringing in Lundqvist. Both of their goalies, I have it down here. Both of their goalies, here we go. Ilya Samsonov and Lundqvist combined are making $2.425 million compared to Vegas, who is paying both of their goalies $12 million a year. And goalies, the NHL is kind of, we're seeing it where teams are going to a 2 goalie system. Like they're relying more on their backup than they ever have before. It's kind of like when the NFL is kind of converted to a dual running back, system. It's not just that one guy anymore, that workhorse running back. Now, you still have your A1 guy, and now it's, a guy that really can fill the role more often than in the past. So it's not just you pay your one goalie a hefty amount and then your backup gets like league minimum. It's not like that anymore. So yeah, man, I don't know. Vegas is going to be in financial straits right now.
Yeah, I don't think, like I said, just to kind of finish that whole spiel on that, I just think that this is, unless they're really, if he stays here for the long run, they're really going to regret that because he's going to be in his late 30s by the end of this contract.
That's the other part of it. You're right.
He's got a ton of miles on him. I mean, he's still a very valuable player in this league. Don't get me wrong. And could potentially be their first captain if they don't give that to Pacioretty. But I just think that this is kind of a head scratcher in terms of if I was a Vegas Golden Knight fan, I would be cautiously optimistic about this signing because you bring in a high caliber player, but you maybe have 4.5 years left of quality play from him to where until it really goes downhill.
I think they just got like blinders on, and we're just so excited that they could land the free agency prize, and they didn't really take a hard look at their financials, which is amazing to me. But whatever. I mean, they're in the situation, they made their bed. Now they're going to have to.
I mean, the real pro is though that they really did need that big defensive guy, and we saw it in the playoffs. So maybe this is just something that they were trying to plug up that hole. And they said, let's, money's not an object right now. We'll figure that out later, and we'll just go after the big guy. As a Western Conference host, what is your view on this? Are you just being like, okay, Vegas, we'll see you in the second round of the playoffs, or is this maybe something like you guys are kind of keeping an eye on Vegas a little bit. Like I was saying on my show with Buffalo in terms of with them being a threat to the Lightning.
Right.
You're just keeping an eye on them to see how that situation plays out.
I
Other
think,
than that,
yeah, I think you have to keep an eye on. I mean, there's still, but we don't know what their final roster is going to look like right now, and
right.
that's they might just have to be throwing bodies in there, bringing up a lot of guys from the AHL to fill in these roles because they don't have the money to really bring in, like top 6 guys. Like they don't have it. So, but the guys that they do have are excellent hockey players. So yeah, you're gonna have to watch them. They'll probably make the playoffs, but I like we said, man, I think this hurts them more than it helps them. So only time will tell. But
yeah,
I wanted to ask you about Detroit.
Okay.
Because everybody seems to be, really liking what Detroit is doing and has done. And I don't get it. So please educate me, because Detroit has nobody under contract for more than 2 years right now. And I think it's Larkin is the only guy that is under contract for the amount. So how is that a good thing? I'm trying to wrap my head around what Detroit is actually trying to do. I know they're going to have a ton of money, and if they want to go spend a lot of money, they can. But with the flat cap era, are they going to be in the same situation that they are in next year? How is this working for them?
So it's funny. You asked me this right before we start recording, and I've given it a lot of thought since then. And I basically, like what I said when we were, not recording, I said basically Stevie Y is doing the same exact thing he was doing in Tampa Bay, and we all saw how that ended up. I mean, Stanley Cup champions. So, and let's make no mistake, maybe I think other than 2 or 3 players off the top of my head on the Tampa Bay Lightning, that's all Stevie Y draft picks and trades. So he's basically following the same format. And what that format is, stock up on draft picks, stock up on guys on short-term contracts that could score. Like, for example, Nemestikov, 2 years, $2 million a year. Bobby Ryan, who, you're taking a chance on him. You're still, the jury's still out. I think we could agree on what we're going to see out of Bobby Ryan. I mean, last year was a very great, heartwarming story.
Sure.
And you're just signing guys that could contribute. You got John Merrill 1 year, under $1 million. So that's great. Troy Stetcher, 2 years, 1.7 million AAV. And you're putting in a solid goaltender. You're not going to get Dominik Hasek right away. You're not going to get Andre Vasilevsky, but you're getting Thomas Greiss, who was decent. I thought he did a very good job when Varlamov was on net. He did have that little disaster against the Lightning, but I thought, I saw him a couple of times in person this year. I thought he played very well for the time that was given to him. They also picked up that veteran presence, which is very important, because whenever you're building a team basically from the ground up, and that's what he's doing, is kind of trimming the fat from the steak that was kind of cooked by the last GM before him. He bought out Justin Abelkader. So bringing in Mark Stahl as kind of that veteran presence to kind of teach some of these guys, how to be a pro, how to handle certain situations. I fully expect none of these guys to be around the next 2
and that's my
years.
question. I mean, I get it. Like you're plugging in these guys, and they'll be decent hockey players, but you're I don't know. Maybe I can't wrap my head around we're not going to be competing.
All right. So this is the best way I could describe it is, it's a chess match. Now, obviously you move up your knight a couple of spaces up. Now, I know this is hard to describe on a podcast, but I'm going to do the best way I can. So you're moving up your knight, but you have your queen right behind you. Now, obviously, you're going to sacrifice your knight. Your knight maybe being, let's say, Nemestikov. Now, eventually, you might trade him in a year for maybe some draft picks or some prospects. But guess what? You have your queen right behind you in Dylan Larkin, who you could pair up the next piece up with. Now, it's something like that, where all of these, what he did was, look what Stevie Y, best example I could think off the top of my head is what he did with Tampa. He basically traded for a unknown prospect, goalie prospect, who was the third goalie going into the season with the Ottawa Senators, I believe back in 2012, and that was Ben Bishop. Now, we all know what happened with Ben Bishop. He flipped him, and we ended up getting Eric Chernak. Now, Eric Chernak isn't, he's not Victor Hedman, but he was a very important part of this team. So basically all these moves that Stevie Y is doing with Detroit, and Red Wings fans should be very patient, because that's what this is. All it takes is big patience, because it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to make sense most of the time.
Yeah.
But what's going to happen is he's trading pieces for potential pieces. He's always going to get value out of the moves that he's making right now in the future.
Right.
And they're gonna be competitive. They're not gonna make the playoffs.
Right.
If they do, they're kind of following along with the Rangers we've seen doing. Now, we thought maybe they were gonna kind of start a little bit of a mini rebuild. And we all know where that happened.
Yeah.
With that, now they look like they could potentially make it to the Eastern Conference Final next year if they get on a little bit of a run. But Stevie Y is, I think, the only player that you should expect him to keep for the long haul out of maybe these group of guys is probably Dylan Larkin, because that's probably going to be your future. That's going to be your future captain.
Right. Exactly. I mean, yeah, it's I get it. It's just you don't see this a lot, because in the era of like free agency, and I kind of lived through it with the Avalanche a few years ago. On record, if it wasn't for Detroit last year, the worst NHL season in history. The very next year they were in the playoffs. So that's just, smart moves by Joe Sakic. He didn't do what Detroit is doing. So I understand what you're saying, but that is, if I was a Detroit fan, I would get it, but I would hate it. I would hate knowing that my team is not going to be really relevant for, could be another 2 or 3 years. Is that kind of the outline that they're looking at before they become a team that can make a run for a playoff spot? 2 or 3 years?
Probably, but here's the thing about Joe Sakic is that he's probably going to stack up on draft picks. And the one thing we all know about Joe Sakic, like I stated earlier, with maybe 3 or 4 players on this Lightning team not being Joe Sakic acquisitions, is that the guy knows how to draft. I mean,
You're talking about Steve. You're talking about Stevie.
Steve. Steve. Okay. I'm sorry.
Right.
He knows how to draft. I mean, he drafted Braden Point. He drafted Nikita Kucherov. He drafted Andrei Vasilevsky. So, I mean, you just look at all those players, and I think that's the best thing that Red Wing fans, like you said, it's not going to be fun, but that's just how it is.
I mean, and maybe because it's Detroit, and it's hockey town, and and it's not like this has just started this year. Like, Detroit has struggled for the past few years, and now you're asking them to be okay with struggling a few more. So and as far as drafts goes, next year, they have their first round, they have 3 second rounds, they have 2 third rounds. So I mean, you have a solid draft, and we saw how the draft fell this year. You had first rounders going in the third round. Who knows what the draft will look like next year, but all right. I mean, I guess
then I wanted to pick your brain on 2 of my favorite moves that I saw from the trades / signings. Now, the first one being a signing, the Torrey Krug to St. Louis. I was shocked. I did not think that St. Louis was going to go after him. Now, obviously, we didn't know the situation. I believe this was before St. Louis, before Alex Pietrangelo signed with Vegas, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
so, maybe, so that was when we probably all thought, okay, that means Pietrangelo's out. But Torrey Krug, 7 years, $45.5 million. I really thought he was going to Detroit, since he is a hometown kid. So what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, that I like that deal. I think, I think Buffalo, I think St. Louis was in a spot where they tried with Pietrangelo. It seemed like he really wanted to hit the market, and St. Louis, maybe it was a little on both ends. And I think, like I said before, I think St. Louis maybe was just assuming he was going to come back. But when I think the numbers started getting thrown on for Pietrangelo, I think St. Louis was like, we can get Krug for cheaper. And I kind of like, Krug's game, like being comparable to Pietrangelo in terms of scoring. Maybe Pietrangelo scores goals a little bit better than Krug, but when you look at their overall points, they're not that far apart from each other. So I think St. Louis was like, we'll save some millions and get a really good player in the process. So I think it was a smart move by St. Louis. I really do. I like that move a lot.
Yeah, that was a great move. And then the trade that I really loved, just because of the little backstory that was behind it, was Columbus getting Max Domi and a 3rd-round pick for Josh Anderson. The funny story behind that was that they were golfing together when the trade was announced.
No way. I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was, I could have only imagined how funny that was when one of them looked at their phone. They're like, do you know any good spots in the area that I can hit up, or want to switch apartments? But yeah, Domi getting paid 2 years, 10.6 mil by Columbus, which was, I mean, he deserves it. Hopefully I like Max Domi. I think he's a really gritty, tough player. Hopefully he could, stay in Columbus and kind of be that guy there.
Yeah. I love, it's amazing how Columbus had a great kind of free agency period and a draft that
the draft was Jekyll and Hyde. They don't know how to draft, but they sure do know how to sign them.
Exactly.
Columbus. And then Montreal signed Anderson to 7 years, 38.5 mil. I think that was a little bit of an overbid there.
Yeah. And that kind of set the market, because that was one of the first deals to go down.
Yeah.
And they just signed tonight Brendan Gallagher. They signed him to a 6-year deal.
Yes.
$6.5 million per.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Brendan Gallagher, he feels like he's been in the league forever. So when I heard that he got that 6-year deal, I was just like, wait a minute. But they're actually, and we'll get into that. Actually, why don't we get into that now? Winners and losers. We'll start with winners, and then we'll
go. Well, let me get into add in for Built Go.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
We'll do that. So most of the time we hit a wall, no matter what job you're working at. When between noon and 2 o'clock, we usually hit some sort of wall and we need some sort of pick me up, and we kind of reach for those 5-hour energy drinks or shots. Well, we talk about Built Bar a lot on the show. They have a brand new product called Built Go. And whether it is a mental or physical wall, you can break through it with Built Go. It's a easy to take 1.5 ounce package. Put it in your desk, put it in your briefcase. If you live in good weather, put it in your golf bag. It's a best workout or pick-me-up gel on the market. It's a 5-hour energy drink without the same crash feeling. Plus, it's natural, so it's better for the body. It's like drinking a Monster drink with a third of the caffeine and with better results. They come in 3 delicious flavors: peanut butter, honey, chocolate, coconut, and chocolate mint. Go to builtgo.com. Use the promo code LOCKED, and you'll get 20% off of your next order. Once again, go to builtgo.com. Promo code is LOCKED, and 20% comes off of your first order at builtgo.com. All right, we can throw some grades out if you would like. Winners and losers. Start wherever you feel. I mean, what do you want? I mean, should we save the winners for last, or should we save the losers for last? I don't know.
Do the losers for last, because unfortunately, one of the losers is my team.
One of your boys. So yeah, and we live in negative society. We always want to save the worst for last instead of saying the best.
Yes. So let's start with, and I think you could agree with me here. I'm not really giving out grades here, because I believe if you were one of the winners, you should get an A and B.
Okay.
One of the winners for me was the Avs, just how they completely swindled Chicago, as well as bamboozled the Islanders.
Yeah.
Just this is already adding some more good quality players to an already very scary, dangerous team out there in Colorado. And then obviously my other winners are the Vegas Golden Knights, with signing Alex Pietrangelo, that being their probably first high profile free agent signing.
Yep.
And then last but not least for my winners is Montreal, signing Tyler Toffoli to 4 years, 17 mil, getting Jake Allen for a 2-year extension, Brendan Gallagher for 6 years. And then also some honorable mentions for the winners to Toronto, basically copying the Lightning's plan of how they formed up their team this year, adding a little bit more of that sandpaper to their team that Toronto was missing the last couple of years. You saw it during the playoffs, just how quickly they fell, and that was because they didn't have guys like Wayne Simmons or now former Lightning players Zach Bogosian. So, and as well as Detroit, all the things they're doing out there, and just really, we're going to be looking back at these moves from Steve Yzerman this year and next year as well, in the next couple of years when they really start to become a very, very good hockey team out there in Detroit.
Yeah. For me, I don't want to, if you want to hear my thoughts on Colorado, I don't want to make this a Colorado Avalanche show. I already have that. So go listen to Locked On Avalanche if you want to hear me wax poetic about what they did. But yeah, I'm very happy with what Colorado has done. I agree with you with Montreal. I have them down. I think those are moves that are like, you would think that they would work out. And if they work out, Montreal is going to be a very good team. We talked about Columbus. I think Columbus deserves all the credit in the world for what they have done. And I think Winnipeg, made some good moves getting like Paul Stastny. Like he's on the downside of his career, but they need somebody like him. But I thought, they did sign, I think they signed like Dylan DeMello too, I think. And I think what Winnipeg did, I like kind of the moves that they made. And finally, I think for a team that did great pretty much for, the draft and free agency, I like what Ottawa did. I don't have a problem with that Murray contract. I think they need that. When you think of a goalie, you think of like the quarterback, and they need someone that they can kind of hang their hat on. And I feel like Murray going over there, I think $6 million per season for him. The term of it, I think, was a little bit long, but they want to have somebody that they can call their guy, and I think it's going to be him. I like what Ottawa's done overall. So those were probably my top grades. Bottom grades, I get what you're saying with Detroit. I just in this era of just being able to sign guy, in the era of free agency, you can turn around a god awful team in an off season. And I understand what you're saying with that. But I think maybe just because it's Detroit and it's an original 6 team, and I just feel like they should be putting numbers together and contracts together relatively quickly. I feel like what they're going to do is what you're saying is going to work. I just feel bad for Detroit fans that they have to kind of go through it.
Well, I think if it was anybody else other than Steve Yzerman, I think Detroit fans would feel a completely different way. So,
point. Yeah.
I think since it is him and he's a god there, I think that it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. I don't, we talked about Vegas, Pietrangelo, good deal for him, bad deal for the team. Vancouver, I don't really like anything that Vancouver did. We'll get to your team. I actually did put Tampa on my list, not because they're strapped. And then finally, Boston. Right. Boston's just sitting there, and I feel like they were trying to get guys, but nobody wanted to go there. Something similar to like Nashville. Nashville was trying like hell to get a lot of players, and just seemed like nobody wanted to go sign with the Predators for some reason. I feel like Boston is in that same boat.
Yeah, it's very strange. The time we're in right now with everything going on, that usually, you would imagine that Boston is kind of a hot destination. One of the really big hockey towns. Now, for the losers, I have a few. Obviously, one of them was surprising when I kind of dug more into what the whole situation was going on out there, and that was Chicago. Obviously, we spoke a moment ago of how they kind of got robbed in that whole trade with the Avs having to retain, but also there's a little bit of drama going out there. Apparently, it was some of the leaders on that team, most notably Captain Jonathan Taves. He came out. He had a little discussion with somebody at The Athletic, and I'm just going to read the quote that he wrote. That he said was, "Bottom line is, I want to win. the expectation for other leaders on this team and myself is to come ready to training camp every year to be a playoff team. We prepare ourselves to win a cup for our fans. I've never been told that we were going through a rebuild. That has never been communicated to me for that matter. A lot of this comes as a shock because it was a completely different direction than what we expected. Now, obviously, a lot of that, Corey Crawford not being offered a deal, Brandon Saad being dealt. It's very interesting to see how that goes. They still have some money that they really need to get rid of if they want to, they did re-sign Dominic Kubalik, which I think was a no-brainer. But yeah, that's just a very unfortunate situation going out, especially when your captain comes out and calls out the franchise saying, we had no idea this was going on. And now you trade Brandon Saad and,
how do you feel?
Corey
How do you feel
Crawford.
like Zadorov feels, coming in and then him making that comment and be like, oh, thanks, dude. Thanks for the warm welcome.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to get back on defense on the break. And then Arizona, just train wreck of an offseason to start, not having a draft pick until the 4th round. Just losing Taylor Hall. I don't think they ever had an actual chance to re-sign him anyway. And then they're just trying to get rid of some guys out there. The big story was Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They were trying to move him. There was something going on behind closed doors. It looked like he just didn't like the way management was going with things. And I believe the new GM that just got hired kind of simmered down the tension with everything there. So it seemed like, everything is good for now. I wouldn't be surprised if we see something reemerge around the trade deadline and we see him dealt.
Sure.
But there's with this dead cap, there's going to be a lot of interesting moves with that. I don't think Arizona is going to get the kind of return that they would have expected for Ekman-Larsson if they trade him in the next 2 years. And then finally, last but not least for my losers is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, like I said at the top of the show when you brought it up, nobody would have expected that we would have had this situation of a flat cap. I mean, you can't anticipate a worldwide pandemic.
Sure.
But the Lightning were swimming in dangerous waters with this. They were, I don't know the exact number, but even with the cap going up, they still would have been a little too close for comfort at that point in time. Now, how do you correct that? Obviously, you have to make deals. You have to trade away unfortunate, valuable assets. One of the notable guys that they've put on waivers was Tyler Johnson. And here's the issue that I have with the Lightning. Why are you handing out no trade clauses like this is trick or treat candy? I was looking at the situation because I'm actually starting a segment, and I'm not going to get too much into this. If you want to listen about me just completely ranting about the Lightning for minutes on end, unfortunately I could only condense it in 30 minutes. Go to Locked On Lightning. You could hear me for 30 minutes a day doing that, but it seems like almost every player on this team has a no trade clause,
really,
or some sort of limited movement clause. Like, for example, I believe like Alex Killorn, he only has 15 teams that he will allow this team to make a deal with. And here's the thing with Tyler Johnson. Now, they missed the boat. They should have, if there was ever a time to make a deal, it would have been during the draft,
right?
For at least some picks. But now more than ever, and that would have been perfect time to capitalize on that post Stanley Cup afterglow with Tyler Johnson, and that didn't happen. And now he might potentially start the season in Syracuse in their AHL affiliate. And it's evolved into this whole mess where they might be forced to trade Alex Killorn, Yanni Gourde, and Andre Palat, guys that play on their first and second lines.
Wow.
And it's just a messy situation, and it doesn't seem like they're in any rush to try and fix it anytime soon. It looks like more of a who's going to blink first kind of situation between Tyler Johnson and the Lightning. And these other guys as well. I just, I do have the utmost respect for the GM, Julien Brisebois, but I just think that the longer you wait, the more potential for this getting even worse in terms of players getting sensed about the treatment of them and all this and that. It's not a good look for the franchise, especially after winning a cup.
Oh yeah, exactly.
What are your thoughts on this?
I'm looking at Cap Friendly right now. They have 12 forwards that soak up $50.68 million of their cap.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Right now, they don't have a third defensive pairing. They have Hedman, McDonough, Coburn, and Shen, and that's it for their. As far as again, according to Cap Friendly. So, yeah, man, they. I don't know how they're gonna. I mean, they like you said, there's gonna be some tough decisions that are gonna be made in the front office of Tampa, and they are gonna have to shed some guys that they don't want to do, kind of like what the Avalanche did going after Devin Taves. So, I mean, maybe they can get some, and what the Islanders did in turn was got, second round draft picks. Maybe that's what Tampa does is pick up some draft picks. Do they have a good system? Like, do they have a good AHL system that some guys are ready to slide in?
Because they've been so good for the last couple of years. They're unfortunate. Their system has kind of taken a little bit of a hit. Some of their top prospects, one of them is probably going to be on their second or first line pairing, depending on what happens with our defenseman in the future. I mean, I would probably see him up this season if they decide not to go out and get a defenseman. But they have 8 players with no movement clauses on this team. Wow. 8 players. Wow. And that's yeah. And I think that especially with everything that's been going with this cap, I wouldn't be surprised if this turns into a league-wide thing where we see less and less of no movement clauses being dished out in contracts. But yeah, it's going to be a tough situation. I mean, it's already tough to keep a team just as competitive after winning a cup, but now you have this on top of it. It's not a good situation. And
that's the sad part of it is you just won a cup and now you're going to have to dismantle important parts of this team.
Yeah.
That part. So, well, if you want to hear more of this Tampa Bay soap opera, definitely tune into the Locked On Lightning with Adam Denker as he will be covering this. I'm sure this is taking up most of your show day in and day out. Is it not?
Yeah, that and the disgusting lack of attention paid to them as Stanley Cup champions,
which is very interesting. And I didn't pick up on that until you put up a post about it, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of true.
I said on my show, it has reached Rodney Dangerfield levels of disrespect. I would have never have thought. I said it to you before we even started. I've never in my entire life, ever since I became a fan of hockey, I have never seen the media just be so nonchalant.
Ignore it pretty much
with a champion from any sport.
That's true.
I'm not even talking hockey. I'm talking all the 4 major sports. Yeah. I don't know what the right answer is to it. I mean, maybe it's because we got the MLB, the NBA, and then NFL starting to crank up a little bit more and more each week.
Right.
Maybe that's it, but it is what it is. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm done ranting about it on my show. I think I'm switching over to the whole, this whole cap situation, but
all right.
Or maybe most of the reporters that have covered the Lightning that are in charge of this whole situation are still on their benders from the parade. So but it's a very strange off season to start off. Wouldn't you agree?
This is the best time of year other than the when games are being played. I love this stuff. I love seeing movement and stuff like that. So
now I'm going to throw you a little question before maybe we wrap things up, unless we have more stuff to talk about.
No, that's
it. Out of all the teams that we spoke about today, other than your Avalanche, other than my Tampa Bay Lightning, who do you see making the most improvement from last year to this coming up season? Just based off all these signings.
It doesn't mean they're going to make the playoffs. Ottawa. I do. I think and maybe they're draft players. I don't know. I mean, Stützle might come right into the NHL. He's NHL ready. So I don't know the exact details of his situation, but if he's there, the moves that they made, I think they're going to be vastly improved. Like I said, I don't think just because improvement doesn't mean, you're a lock for the playoffs, but from where they were last year to where they could go this year, I think they can. I think they can have. I think
Stutzel is. I think we spoke about on our post recap draft show that I think we agreed that he was the most polished off player out of this whole, these top 5 guys. Yeah. And for my pick for most improvement is actually another Canadian team, but that is the Montreal Canadiens.
Yeah, they're another one. Yeah.
They have that playoff experience, and most of those players that were on their team were a mixture of guys who are still in their primes, who still have got 3 to 5 years left in their primes, and then they have all these young guys that they brought up for the playoffs to at least get that experience.
Sure.
Now, on top of that, you get Tyler Toffoli, who, 4 years, 17 million. To me personally, with how valuable he's been in recent years with certain teams, especially the Kings and, the Canucks, I think that will turn out to be a steal of a deal potentially. I think this is scary where, think about where the Canadians were at the beginning of the season. There was talk that they were going to trade Carey Price.
Yes.
Now there's zero reason to trade Carey Price, considering how I think maybe they need 2 more pieces unless they make a trade for a big name guy, because they do have the cap space to where, I think that would have been a good landing spot for Taylor Hall. Now I know the taxes kind of scare away certain players from Canada, but that would have been a good spot for him to kind of cement himself, because if he goes there and plays well, he's a god.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
You Montreal is like the Dallas Cowboys of hockey. So yeah, you I don't want to say turn that franchise around. Obviously you're very well, the history goes on and on, but currently, you join that team and take them deep into the playoffs. Oh my God, they'll erect statues for you.
Yeah, like Max Pacioretty, who didn't win a cup there. You could probably go into any bar in Canada and not have to pay for his tab.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know, man. I love this stuff, but I assume we keep saying this, but we assume we're gonna be back next Thursday. We don't know. We're kind of filling in here, but we've been filling in for a little while. So until they tell us to stop, we'll be back.
Until they cut the mic. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll be back next Thursday with any other news that might have happened during the week. But until then, definitely check out Locked On Avalanche, check out Locked On Lightning. You can find me on Twitter, LOPN_Avalanche. Adam, where they can get you.
You could follow the show account at LO_Lightning. You can follow me at AP Denker, DENKER. Definitely go check us out. Locked On Avalanche is killing it with the graphics right now. So go ahead and check that out.
Appreciate that. So, all right, guys, we will see you next week. And don't forget that The Last Jedi is a great movie. So, thank you.
Absolutely.
We'll end with that.